This is a story you probably remember. You've heard millions of times, the walk to Emmaus. But I want to approach it a little bit differently this time if we can. So we're back in Luke. We were in John last week, and we've been mostly in John. And I think we're going back to John soon. But just a reminder, Luke, each of the four Gospels were written for a different audience, right? And Luke was believed, the scholars believe, was written towards a Gentile, the converted Gentile audience. They would have been educated, most likely Greek-speaking audience. Am I echoing? It's my aura. That's what it is. Turn mine off. Ooh. Thank you. Thank you. I'm unhooked. There it is. Thank you very much. How is this? Much better. All right. My aura has left. It has left the building. So as I was saying, Luke was kind of written towards a Gentile audience, those Gentiles who had converted to Christianity. So just prior to this passage in Luke, the women would have gone to the tomb, found the rock rolled away. They would have looked into the tomb and seen that it was empty. Then they would have been two men in glowing clothing, is what he says, something like that. Basically, two angels appear and asks why they are looking for the living among the dead. And remember what Jesus told you. And so they run back to find the 11 apostles and tell them. And then again, in this gospel, Peter runs to the tomb, sees the linen cloths that we heard nothing about when the women looked in, but they're linen cloths left there. And then I love this part. He goes home amazed at what happened. He just goes home. Like, okay, that's good. So here's what I want to do today. Hopefully everybody's got a copy of this passage somewhere on your table or something. I want to approach this in a way, it's a different kind of reading of the story. And if you will just listen as I read it, you can read along if you'd like, but just listen as I read it. And I want you to be listening for whatever word or phrase might jump out at you this time. Okay, so that means focusing on this. If you can do it, I know it's early, but if you'll just focus on what you're hearing and tell me what jumps out at you after this. All right, here we go. Now, on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him." Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory? Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us? That same hour, they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. So what jumps out at you? Phrase, word, anything? Who are the two men? That's what jumps out at you? Okay. Are you asking me that? You asking me that? Okay. So we know one of them is Cleopas, right? Because they name him. We don't have any other mention of Cleopas in the New Testament at all. So we really don't know who he is. And the other one is unnamed. So we don't know who they are. We have to assume that they were close followers of Jesus to have known what they already knew. What else?
At the end of the first long paragraph there, it says, "Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures." That must have been a long discussion.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It is. It is.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Can they not hear me? Oh, can't hear him. So what he said was, what jumped out at him was, then beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. And he just said that must have been an awful long time. I guess it was a long walk too, right? Yeah. Long discussion. What else? Anything else from this jump out at you? I'll tell you what jumped out at me when I read it yesterday, but tell me what you got. Yeah. The way they described the things or who Jesus was. Aha. Yeah. Just then. Yeah. So what he said was as they describe who Jesus was to this man they don't think they know, they don't say that he was the Messiah. Yeah. So did they really know who he was? Yeah. Right? That's interesting, isn't it? And you have to wonder about that. How did that happen? What was that about? Why? Lots of questions about that one. Mark, did you have something? Yes. Right. 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 What he pointed out was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory? Yeah, that they would not have known that or realized that. Yeah, where do you see that? Oh, okay, yeah. Right, right. Interesting, because we only hear about in the previous pericope that we don't have right here, but I can look it up, we only hear about one person. Well, the two women, or actually there were more than two women in this case, most likely. They believe Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, perhaps, and a few others. But we also know, they also tell us that Peter went. But you're right, a few of us means more than one, doesn't it? So there are more that had gone that we don't know about or weren't mentioned here.
I love the line near the beginning that Jesus himself came near with them.
Yeah. Jesus himself came near and went with them. Yeah. What you got, Brandon? How do we know it's a male? It is the only time. And that's a really good question. Why don't you Google that and tell us what you find out? That's a great question. Say that again.
Cleopas is in the US.
Okay, mine says AS. Yeah, so there's some question here for those of you online about whether Cleopas was male or female. And Brandon is going to find out for us. Yeah, Phil. Uh-huh. Exactly. Phil says he, the part about them not recognizing him all throughout the walk and throughout the dinner until he breaks the bread, and then reminiscent of that Last Supper, they realize who he is.
Close with him.
Yes.
They were not recognized.
Right.
It makes you believe that they could have known who it was if their eyes had been able to see.
Exactly, because they knew that they recognized him because they'd been at that communion or that last dinner, right? They'd also been around the other apostles when they'd run to the tomb to see. So they had all that knowledge. So that lets us know that they were closely tied to Jesus, but didn't recognize him. Their eyes, as I think Paul pointed out in the beginning, their eyes were kept from recognizing him. Was. Yeah. Right. Right. They the point made was that they kept using the word was, that he was supposed to be our Messiah or our king, I think. And kept using the past tense like he was. Is that was that your point? Yeah. Because they believe he's dead, right? But they don't know. Yeah, they did. They turned around and went back to tell what they had seen. Exactly. So remember what kind of king they were looking for? What kind of king did they want? What did they think Jesus was supposed to do? Do you remember that? Yeah, he was supposed to be a king and he was supposed to slaughter all their enemies and put them back on top. But that's not what he was. And I think that's why a lot of them don't believe that's who he was meant to be. Here's what, anybody else have anything? Here's the phrase that really jumped out at me. But we had hoped. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. How many times have you felt that way about something or said that yourself? But I had hoped. That one just really caught me. Is there the next slide, I think, talks about some of the prophets. Somebody pointed out the long discussion that he must have had on the walk, right? About all the different things that were said about him. So I pulled some of them. Starting in Deuteronomy, where Moses said, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among your own people. You shall heed such a prophet. And we find that Peter quotes that again in Acts 3, after he heals a lame man in the temple. This is after Jesus, of course, Acts of the Apostles, after Jesus has died and been resurrected. So Peter quotes that verse. Then in Zechariah, one of the many, 9:9, rejoice greatly, O daughter Zion, shout aloud, O daughter Jerusalem, lo, your king comes to you, triumphant and victorious is he, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So there's the prophecy about the donkey. And then Isaiah has a ton, but the one I quoted here, Isaiah reports God saying to him, but there will be no gloom for those who were in anguish. In the former time, he brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the latter time, he will make glorious the way of the sea, the land beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the nations. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shined. And of course, a lot of the Messiah comes out of Isaiah's prophecy, right? Recognize a lot of those words. And I think that's all I have about prophets, right? Yeah, this I want to show you guys. This is interesting. So this is an Italian painter, Caravaggio. Anybody in here like art-minded and know anything about it? Because I'm not, but I've researched it. Caravaggio. Okay. Thank you, Brandon. Okay. So this is his. Exactly. That's what I read about him. Yeah, he has quite the interesting history. So this is his supper at Emmaus. So if you look at the picture to the left, seated with his hands kind of on the chair, is Cleopas. They believe that's what he was painting there. To the right would be the unnamed person that was walking with him, and the man standing is the innkeeper. So this is the moment when they realize who Jesus is. Yes. Yeah, well, when you're resurrected. So the moment when they realize who he is, the Cleopas on the left, he's ready to just jump out of his chair, right? And then the man on the right, the critics that I looked at, or the interpretation of it, said, look at the way his arms are, reminiscent of Jesus's arms on the cross, right? Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Yeah. Uh-huh. I don't know if yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, that's okay. It's a very good point you make, though. I appreciate your pointing that out. Yes. So what he said was the man in the skull cap, a lot of Muslims wear the skull cap, and could perhaps that innkeeper have been Muslim? And then the thought was that's probably pre-Islam at that time, or at least in that area. You see a woman? Is that Jesus that you're thinking about? With their hand up? That's supposed to be Jesus. Yeah. That's his depiction of Jesus. Does look like a woman. I'll admit that. Yeah. No question is stupid. All right. Now here's what one of the people who interpreted it said, perhaps the painter was asking what happens when the world experiences a miracle. Is this the reaction maybe when the world or the world you're in experiences a miracle? Excitement, astonishment, disbelief. So there's something else in this painting that if you'll flip to the next slide that has been pointed out. And it's in the basket. As you see, there's a basket kind of on the edge of the table there that has fruit in it. Is it not wanting to go?
The outstretched hand is almost like the offered Thomas.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so look at the basket. There are two curves right there, kind of below, at a pomegranate maybe? Below the pomegranate. One curves up, one curves down. In the symbol of the fish, can you see it? Yeah. So that's the ancient Christian. Remember, they would, if they were on the beach or wherever they were, they would make one mark in the sand or in the dirt. And if the other person made the other mark to complete the fish, they knew they were in the company of a Christian. That was kind of their secret symbol when they were being persecuted. So this is his way of showing his faith, right? Because he's showing it. It's really fascinating. And I don't know who figured that out, but hopefully you can see it. It's fascinating. Now there's one more in the next picture. Look to the right in the shadow. Do you see the tail of the fish? Isn't that wild? Yeah. So I thought that was really neat. And then would you circle around that fish that's in the middle there, Andy? There you go. That's it. That's it right there. Yeah. So really cool. That's just an aside. I thought you'd like to see that. I think the next slide is just questions for you guys. It's about that time, right? So here, both of the men say, we were hoping, but have you ever been in a situation of discouragement or grief, which led you to say, I was hoping, but. So that's the first question. Do we allow ourselves to be changed by the risen Christ, or do we return to business as usual? Okay, we just come through Easter, right? Is it just another day? Or is it impactful for you? Did it change who you are? Did it change the way you live? Just a thought. And then the last one, how do we reveal the presence of Jesus in our midst? How do we reveal that to others? Perhaps? How do we talk about it in the world today with our friends or family? I know coworkers is probably not cool, but so that's what I got. It's not a whole lot, but thought it was interesting. This is a story you guys have heard so many times. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. You bet. Any questions before y'all break up?